Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're going to recap this week in cannabis from May 10th to the 16th. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And then of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, make sure you subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can rewatch the videos, learn about the industry, identify the companies that you keep seeing pop up that you think might do well in the long run, and take advantage whenever you are ready. And we start with some big news out of Colorado as they report selling more than $500 million in legal cannabis in 2021's first 3 months. That is massive. According to the State Department of Revenue on Tuesday, cannabis sales were over $560 million between January and March. More than $10.5 billion in cannabis has been sold in Colorado since it was legalized in 2014. Think about it, this is the first state to do it. There are 16 states behind them that have legalized, and there are another 33 to eventually do it. And those sales over time have translated into over $1.7 billion in tax revenue that goes towards public schools, infrastructure projects, and local government programs. So this is pretty amazing, and in March, sales reached $207 million in that month alone. In exchange, the state collected $39.6 million in taxes. So let's see how Colorado breaks down their revenue distribution. Cannabis tax revenue is collected through 3 state taxes: a 2.9% sales tax on cannabis sold in stores, a 15% tax on retail cannabis, and a 15% retail cannabis excise tax. That is a lot of tax, to be quite honest. Now, state law requires 71% of the total to be remitted to the Cannabis Tax Cash Fund, a budget account that is statutorily required to fund healthcare, health education, substance abuse prevention, and treatment programs, and law enforcement. The remaining 29% is then subdivided between the state public school fund and the general fund. Schools receive just over 12% of the total, while the general fund receives greater than 15%. And in April, the public school fund received over $14 million. The account supports school construction projects and is controlled by the School Board Investment Fund, a 3-member panel responsible for maintaining the fund's capital that was established in 2016. So Colorado is a great blueprint in itself for any other states or countries looking to legalize cannabis. Meanwhile, the Cannabis Tax Fund received over $16 million, and the general fund received $3.5 million from March alone. So this story first reported and published by the Center Square, but this is awesome, just showing again the first state to do it, making so much money. Then Michigan cannabis sales increased 149% in April to $154 million. During April, Michigan cannabis sales increased 149% from a year ago to $153.8 million, a 5% increase from March, which had one more day, reaching a new all-time high. Now, the Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency breaks out sales by medical and adult use, with medical sales improving 43% from a year ago to $48.4 million, and adult use sales soaring 278% to $105.2 million. Again, that first year after legalizing adult use, the sales jump an enormous amount, as shown now in Michigan. We saw that in Illinois. We'll likely see that in Arizona, and we're going to see that for every state to follow. Michigan generated $985 million in cannabis sales in 2020, and the program should continue to expand this year as supply becomes more available and distribution expands. So far in 2021 year to date, which accounts for 4 months, with April, sales are up 171% to over $500,000 already. So great numbers to see out of Michigan. And obviously on top of that, the cannabis industry is expected to add $92 billion overall to the total U.S. economy in 2021. Now this is a cool infographic that breaks down which states bring in the most money revolving around cannabis. So not just from selling cannabis itself, but as you can see, from jobs to taxes to real estate, the impact of the cannabis industry has a large and growing impact. The more green the state, the more money they bring in. Obviously, California is its own country pretty much, but then you can see behind that other of these top states, but more mature states as well, racking in more dollars. So from jobs, tax revenue to commercial real estate, the cannabis industry has a large and growing impact on the broader economy in the U.S. The total U.S. economic impact from cannabis sales in 2021 is expected to reach $92 billion, up more than 30% from last year alone, and upwards of $160 billion in 2025, according to analysis from the newly published MJ Biz Factbook. So to measure the industry's economic impact, MJ Biz Daily analyzed similar industries and applied a similar or standard multiplier of 3.5 on projected recreational and medical cannabis retail sales. The numbers are a great best guess because the cannabis industry structure is somewhat unique because it encompasses agriculture, manufacturing, and retail. It encompasses a lot more, almost like from farm to table, like a similar comparison, from cultivation to distribution to retail. There's all of that. So, it's more than just, it's not like an isolated industry. It involves a lot of others, which is good for overall economies. In this case, for every $1 consumers and patients spend at retail locations, an additional $2.50 will be injected into the economy, much of it at the local level. And so that impact comes directly from day-to-day needs of workers in the cannabis industry, including spending on life necessities such as housing, transportation, entertainment, and more, getting to work, lunch, getting back home from work. Cannabis businesses, consumers, and patients also pay hundreds of millions of dollars in states and local taxes that are used to fund state and local government activities, including schools and roads, things that should definitely be focused on and worth investing in for, any functioning, growing society. In addition, real estate receives a boost from new retail, manufacturing, and agricultural businesses moving into an area or established companies expanding, increasing broader demand for commercial properties. Plus, cultivating and manufacturing cannabis can require large investments in equipment and technology that boost not only the local economy, but also areas throughout the U.S. The list goes on. So the economic impact will vary by state based on the size, maturity, and type of market. So obviously this growth will take time, and we're going to see it evolve and unfold over time, which is really interesting. But for example, as the largest market in the U.S., California's cannabis industry is expected to pump close to $20 billion into the state's economy in 2021. No other state comes close to that amount, but states such as Colorado, Illinois, Oregon, and Washington will provide more than $10 billion each for their local economies in the coming years. And note that Colorado, Oregon, and Washington have been legalized for a very long time. Illinois only legalized adult use January 2020. And they're going to be that close to bringing in $20 billion. So expect the same for markets in densely populated states such as New Jersey and New York as they develop. If we consider total population, some states benefit more than others, obviously because of bigger markets. So that is a really cool thing to walk through, though. Just a lot of benefits overall from this industry growing. And again, it's not just... It was never about people just getting stoned or consuming to get high, right? It expands into all these other industries, and we're just going to find out more and more as we go, which is great. Now, just a reminder, if you missed earlier this week's episode, 2 U.S. House Republicans pitched federal cannabis legalization bill in the House of Representatives, which was a huge surprise. They've introduced a bill that would legalize cannabis federally in a manner similar to alcohol, which is obviously a great initiative. The bill, Common Sense Cannabis Reform for Veterans, Small Businesses, and Medical Professionals Act, is sponsored by Reps David Joyce of Ohio and Don Young of Alaska, and the measure would remove cannabis from the Federal Controlled Substances Act, provide explicit banking protections to the cannabis industry, allow military veterans access to state legal cannabis programs, and expand research. However, it does say nothing about social justice provisions like expunging past records. And we've come a long way, but I think that's definitely mandatory. And so that's why it's going to be exciting to see Schumer's bill. And on top of that, though, Senator Susan Collins, a Republican from Maine, just became the 37th co-sponsor of the Safe Banking Act. And just a few years ago, she argued against cannabis banking amendments, saying it would be allowing banks to essentially finance dealers of recreational cannabis. Took until Maine's main agricultural crop last year became cannabis, probably for her to wrap her head around that change. But again, nice to see that list slowly growing. And again, we've got time for the SAFE Act. But I wanted to show this. Schumer reiterates that cannabis legalization must pass before cannabis banking reform. Now, I just want to say that in my view, from reading this article and watching the video, it's a bit misleading because at no point does he say that it has to pass. It seems to be the issue for Chuck is that he wants to at least get the comprehensive reform bill introduced onto the floor of the Senate before he moves forward with SAFE. Now, obviously, he said a lot of things, so we don't necessarily know, but this title to me is a bit misleading. If you read it and got something different, let me know in the comments because I'm curious. And so what I get out of reading all this is not that it has to pass before he even looks at SAFE, is just that he wants to get his bill introduced first before he even starts, looking at how they can bring them all together. That's what I got, but let's just look at the interview.
Are we going to get marijuana descheduled or rescheduled? Are we going to get to a point where we can actually unravel some of the inequities that are associated with it? This is my favorite question, so I saved it till last. And give me a time frame because people really want this to happen.
Well, here's the immediate time frame. The 3 people working on a comprehensive bill are myself, Senator Wyden and Senator Booker. And we will be introducing our bill shortly. And it is not just legalization, but it deals with the injustices of the past, expungement of the records, making sure that the money that's made from marijuana goes to the communities of color, poor people communities that have paid the price for this ridiculous scheduling of marijuana.
Poor people communities? Did he just say that? Poor people communities?
That have paid the price for this ridiculous scheduling of marijuana, like it's like heroin or cocaine or something like that.
And I'm assuming you're waiting on the SAFE Act because you want a more comprehensive piece of legislation.
Correct. That is correct. We want it comprehensive. We're not going to bargain against ourselves. We want strong, comprehensive bill. We'll introduce it. And then there's huge support.
See, so that's where I just want to say, we'll introduce it, but it doesn't say anything about his bill having to pass before SAFE passes at all. So just wanted to point that out.
Listen to this. South Dakota.
Oh, that's just his talking point. That South Dakota, a red state, 67% voted to legalize. That's a big number. So look, we've got about 2 weeks based on what we've heard that Schumer said to CEOs of MSOs that he would drop this in May. So we've got time. He's got time. We just got to trust that he's putting the work in. But that's just what I wanted to share out of this. Let me know what you think below. Now we're going to move on to some interviews with CEOs that sort of reiterate what they've been told and what we can expect in the coming few months.
We'll also be doing some strategic acquisitions, which will be preparing our company for national legalization when interstate commerce comes, to bring down our costs and to be competitive against CPG, mainstream CPG companies, whether they be drinks companies like Anheuser-Busch or others that may get into the sector. So you'll start seeing us investing in technology, start seeing us investing in genetics and other areas which are going to help us in a competitive environment as we move to full legalization.
That process of full legalization, Boris, you changing our expectations for when that's exactly going to come in? How speedy can it be?
Listen, I think, we know that, at least we've been told by people in the Senate and Congress, that if they put the states, the Safe Banking Act up to vote now, it would pass. However, Senator Schumer wants to get a more comprehensive bill through. He wants to get decriminalization, legalization, interstate commerce, a fix on 280E, a fix on banking, as well as social justice and other issues, which are very, very important and we support. However, I just don't know. It's very difficult to predict whether he's got the votes to get a more comprehensive package through. But the senator obviously knows the Senate and the Congress better than we do. Yeah. So he's given us a lot of confidence that he will get it done this year.
Just curious, Boris, do you think that we'll actually see a comprehensive bill on this, or do you think it might actually end up being broken up into little bits and pieces, kind of spread throughout various other legislation?
From what I hear, he's going to launch a comprehensive bill in May. What it will end up by the time it's voted on, I agree, will probably be something less than a full comprehensive bill, just because I don't think they've got the votes for a full comprehensive legalization in either the Senate or the House, for that matter.
So I think that was great to highlight just the difference between introducing and the amount of time that it takes for something to actually become law. And in that time, changes can be made, things can be taken out, things can be added. Just wanted to highlight that. It's a long process, and, again, Schumer knows his Senate better than anyone. You got to trust that he's going to do the work. And again, this is going to make him legendary if he legalizes cannabis. But at the same time, MSOs have to do their thing, trust what they've been told, work towards that goal. And then us as investors, we just got to go based off of what the best information we can find. And so after a great earnings from Curaleaf, we've got CEO of Green Thumb Industries, Ben Kovler, on here talking with Zach Guzman of Yahoo Finance, basically going through what his company saw over the last 3 months, how they're focusing on building brand and then getting that brand into new markets to supply that demand.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me back. Happy to discuss it. We're very excited about what's going on in Virginia. What we see, quite simply, is 8.5 million people and a well-thought-out regulatory structure where there are 5 licenses. And this is what we've done before. And we're excited as cannabis comes to the South really for the first time, and happy to be a part of it.
There's also, expansion plans in a lot of different states right now. New York is a big one. That's the kind of everyone's got their eyes on that prize there as that gets off the ground. How quickly do you see, turning around from operating in these states in a small capacity to really turning that on and growing quickly once you can there?
Yeah, you're right. We've been a part of the medical to adult use transition in many states, including Massachusetts, Nevada, most recently Illinois. It went from a small medical market to a really booming adult use market that really hasn't matured yet and is still going.
Yeah.
So we see that coming, all across the East Coast. New York, the biggest. There's 20 million people that live in the state. It's coming. We think it starts on or around January 1st, 2023. And we're hustling to get going. I think all the operators are, and all the new entrepreneurs that are going to be in the space. But it's also coming to New Jersey, and we see it coming to Virginia. And so we've talked about the tidal wave coming across the country, and it's really amazing to see it come true. And it's really exciting for American consumers because they're going to have access to cannabis products to be able to choose well-being. So it's pretty awesome.
Ben, I also wanted to ask, just when it comes to your latest quarterly results, what kinds of products, what form factors have really taken off over the course of the past quarter and the past year? And are you seeing any new trends when it comes to the types of consumables that your customers are looking for?
Sure. I mean, it's a lot of the same story. There's innovation happening, and we're on the forefront of that. But for example, flower, rhythm, Find Your Rhythm is taking off. High quality indoor premium flower. It's no surprise. Dog walkers, pre-rolls. These are pre-roll joints ready to smoke, but also gummies and vape and everything else are going well. Where there's innovation, where things are changing is maybe in beverage, ready to consume. We see the country really as an off-prem, if you take alcohol, where it's off-premises consumption of cannabis to have your experience, slowly coming on-prem and having ready to consume, socially dosed, safe product for consumers is pretty awesome.
Yeah, when you look at the growth there for beverages, obviously a lot of people starting to lean in there, even your competition there in Curaleaf out with their Select Squeeze, kind of squeezable into drinks everywhere too. Talk to me about what you plan on doing with that can partnership to roll out beverages, because right now it's available in Illinois, but what else do you see playing out there in the next kind of markets there in the timeline?
Yeah, Can is an awesome, exciting, leading cannabis beverage out of California that we've partnered with to bring to adult use markets across the country, really. So we started in Illinois, we launched it in 420. These are consumers that are looking for an alternative to alcohol. They may not be marijuana consumers necessarily, but nobody's a fan of a hangover. And here's a healthy alternative with no hangover. So we see it coming to places like New York and New Jersey. It's already in Massachusetts, and we'll see that scaling up over time.
And then, Ben, I also wanted to ask about channel. How are people buying your products? Because it seemed like opening more retail locations really helped Green Thumb in this latest quarter. Going forward, is it still really that in-person footprint that matters when it comes to picking up new customers? Or are there other channels that may start to pick up steam?
Well, the real growth driver of our business are the branded consumer products. It's more dog walkers, it's more Incredibles, it's more rhythm for more American consumers. That is the core business. We opened 4 or 5 stores towards the end of the quarter. That didn't really drive the first quarter. You'll see that come in the second quarter. But what's happening is more Americans are lining up for more products, and we are in the right place at the right time, making a lot more of those products to feed the demand.
Yes, sir. All right, and then on to Kim Rivers speaking with CNBC on Fast Money, talking a little bit about their recent earnings and then their acquisition with Harvest. So this will be the last of the interviews for the most part, and then we'll get into some of the finer details and states.
Good to see you as well. Thanks so much for having me.
Can you walk us through the deal making in the U.S.? Should we think of it more as a land grab right now because you're not necessarily achieving scale because things are so siloed state by state until it's federally legal?
This lady has no
clue. Yeah, so I definitely would not characterize it as a land grab. Trulieve, if you're familiar with our company and the foundations upon which we're built, we're certainly we are focused on scale within the markets that we exist in. And while many companies in 2019 and 2020 specifically went very wide yet shallow, we chose to really focus on core markets and going deep in those core markets. And this transaction is more of that strategy being executed across regional hubs. And so what we see in terms of the future landscape of cannabis is that it is going to be very important to be strategically located across the country, but to have, again, depth and scale in those markets. To your point, we are somewhat limited in certain markets in terms of the scale that we can achieve. However, there are markets where scale is possible. So for example, in Florida, where we have approximately 50% of the market share, we have over 2 million square feet of grow, and we have 82 stores open in that market. In Pennsylvania, Harvest has a sizable footprint. In Pennsylvania is also an important market for Trulieve as well. And then when you shift to the Southwest market, Arizona, Harvest is the premier player in the Arizona market with significant cultivation and dispensaries. They actually have 18 licensed dispensaries and are the leader in that very important market that just shifted to recreational. So while I agree with you that from a national perspective, you can't achieve scale yet on a combined platform, it is important to go ahead and get scale and deep penetration and relationships with customers across specific markets in the U.S.
That DP. Need it.
Hey, Kim, it's Tim. Congrats on this deal. And I know this is the kind of a deal you've been looking at for a long time. As an investor,
Timmy,
I see that your stock historically had traded somewhat cheap to your other, call them, high cap peers in the space. I'm curious why not use some cash on this deal for a company that's so profitable. You've generated a lot of free cash flow, and at a time when we all believe that at least much of the industry is going to continue to re-rate. I'm curious about that approach. I think the valuation of Harvest was healthy, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that if anything, now that you are in a few states, the re-rating of your stock is part of the story here around this transaction.
Sure. Yeah, Tim, I mean, I think that as we know, right, cash is very important in this industry, particularly around the fact that, it is difficult to achieve, market rate financial terms because of our limitations at the federal level, along with our tax rate, which we've talked about.
Better to keep your cash.
With you all. So, and look, I mean, we plan to use that cash to invest in these markets and to make sure that they are, turned on as much as possible so that we can continue to generate returns like we have in the past, right? I mean, you're talking about, with this combination, creating the most profitable cannabis company in the world. And that return on investment is very important. It's something that we're very focused on. So when you look at the price of the deal, I think it's important to note that Harvest had an incredibly strong Q1, which is just the beginning for them in terms of their continued, profitability. They had 30% EBITDA margins. They tripled their EBITDA from Q4, significant beat on revenue. And so we've been working with them behind the scenes and doing extensive diligence for over 5 months now. So we're very, very comfortable with their position and certainly are very excited for our shareholders with respect to the future that this combined transaction brings.
Kim, always good to see you. Thanks for keeping us posted. All right. So Tim, what did you make of the deal here? Do you think there's more deal making to come in the sector?
Well, I'm very excited. I'm a shareholder, so I'm long the stock, and I think it's very accretive ultimately to the combined entity. I think this is a case where you've seen a lot of deals in the past where 1 + 1 didn't equal 3. It actually equaled like 1.3, and this is a deal where I think it is worth more. I think the M&A in the industry is going bananas. I think consolidation. I think the top 5 or 6 players, top 10 players are looking to get bigger. I think they have more access to capital than they've ever had. And I think the industry, which has pulled back 20 to 30, 40% in the last few months, the fundamentals are never better. So, I think this is just the beginning.
All right.
Yeah.
See you.
I agree, Tim. Well said. And on top of that, this one comes from Todd, referencing what came out of the CGF Cannabis Conference, US sales beginning to hit 2021 inflection point. In terms of industry performance, based on our review of state-level data and discussions with many of the presenting companies, it appears that as of March-April, many US markets have begun to see sizable increases in demand/volumes as COVID-19 restrictions continue to improve and with stimulus checks hitting accounts. As a result, although Q1 2021 looks to have surpassed Q4 2020 levels, it appears that Q2 2021 performance is once again primed to see all-time highs. Oh, is it really now? As the U.S. continues to regulate and implement legalized cannabis platforms throughout the country. Imagine they meant to say country there. And just on top of Tim saying that the drop, the 30%, 40% re-rating, well, we find out more culprits of who is selling. After building a cannabis stake, a mutual fund sells for compliance reasons. Now, unfortunately, this one is blocked by Barron's again, but I did end up finding it. So, where they highlight after building a cannabis stake, a mutual fund sells for compliance reasons, which at least helps us make sense of the large sell-off in March and April, but I highlighted the main bit, so we're going to go through this. A Utah-based mutual fund that built big positions in U.S. cannabis stocks has sold the stakes for an estimated $100 million. Orders from its own compliance department forced the firm to walk away from the U.S. cannabis industry, Barron's has learned. What sucks and what's frustrating is that we'll never know exactly why, but at least for that reason, they've sold for large profits, which obviously did cause the price to go down. Maybe they're just going to rinse and repeat and do it all over again. But through its Wasatch microcap value and microcap funds, Last year, they built up large stakes in several U.S. multi-state operators like Green Thumb Industries, Cresco Lab, and Terra Ascends. The funds began to unload shares in mid-February at all-time highs and fully exited their American weed positions by the end of March. Wasatch declined to comment. Their latest ownership disclosure posted Tuesday shows no ownership stake in the U.S. multi-state operators, confirming their exit. It was not immediately clear why the compliance department ordered the move. Dozens of states allow cannabis sales under their laws, but weed remains illegal under federal law, so this just highlights the discrepancy between state laws and federal laws and why we need SAFE Banking Act to pass, and then why these MSOs can't even uplist on major exchanges yet. But the stocks climbed after cannabis reformers saw numerous victories in the November 2020 U.S. elections. But 2021 has proven more difficult. Why? For us, because big funds are selling their long positions? Now, that wasn't in the article, I just added that, but if we look, advisor shares pure U.S. cannabis ETF MSOs dropped 17% from February 14th through the end of March during the sell-off. At the same time, so did Cresco, falling 18%, Green Thumbs falling 20%, and Terra Ascend sinking 35%. As of December 31st, per Wasatch's previous disclosure, the firm owned roughly $84 billion worth of U.S. pot stocks, including $29 million in Green Thumb, $27 million in Cresco, $21 million in Terra Ascend, and $7 million in VRNO. While in January, Wasatch was among investors that bought shares of Cresco stock in a transaction totaling $125 million. So as of December 31st, they own $127 million of Cresco stock. Then in January, it seemed like they bought $125 million more. The firm first began acquiring shares of multi-state operators in early 2020, according to filings, of course, so they are locking in profits, and that does explain the large sell-off in Cresco. Wasatch's decision to exit the U.S. cannabis positions is a sign of how tricky it is for U.S. weed companies to attract and retain investors now, but that will change. TIAA CREF recently bought shares of Green Thumb. Putnam Investments bought a stake in Terra Ascend, highlighting how important SAFE is for this industry, and that when it does pass, it's going to be very beneficial for the investors that have been patient and waiting. And I just want to share this tweet by this guy, Professor Billionaire, highlights the exact same way that I feel about this. The recent MSO dump by institutional investors due to compliance is the clearest evidence yet that this is going to skyrocket. It shows that institutional money wants in desperately, but it can't. Soon, in Schumer's words, they'll be able to, and the race will be on. So this is just why I emphasize patience. If you cannot handle cannabis industry at its worst, or you can't handle markets at its worst, you do not deserve them at their best. And sadly, you have to hold through the rough stuff in order to lock in those profits when you do. And it's ever so sweet when you can. Now, on top of some state news, recreational cannabis bill passed House in historic vote in Minnesota. Great to see this. History was made in Minnesota Thursday when, for the first time, a bill to legalize recreational cannabis reached the House floor. And more history was made when HF 600 was passed as amended 72-61. But supporters shouldn't get too excited. What a royal waste of time and resources then if they know there's zero chance it's going to happen in this Senate, said Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka, Republican. So obviously he's like the Mitch McConnell in Minnesota right now. Even so, the bill co-sponsor said that he's not discouraged, and this is House Majority Leader Ryan Winkler. At a news conference before the floor session, Winkler said just bringing the bill to a vote may still let Republicans opposed to cannabis legalization express their support over other provisions in the bill, including the creation of an oversight board or expungement of low-level cannabis convictions. Cool. I mean, obviously for the House and for the citizens of Minnesota, this would have been a huge victory, but sadly it's stopped short in its tracks by ignorant politicians. So, people of Minnesota, make sure this person does not get voted in next time if you want progress. And on top of that, not the only state to fumble the ball, Mississippi justices toss voter-backed cannabis initiative. Mississippi will remain in the minority of states without a medical cannabis program after the state Supreme Court on Friday overturned an initiative that voters approved last fall. Why are the Supreme Court judges overturning what the voters want? A decision that also limited other citizen-led efforts to put the issue on a statewide ballot. At the heart of the ruling is the fact that initiatives need signatures from 5 congressional districts to get on the ballot. But because of Mississippi's stagnant population, the state only has 4 districts. 6 justices ruled that the medical cannabis initiative is void because the state's initiative process is outdated. Oh, so they're ruling what the people of Mississippi voted for as void because of government's inability to keep their processes up to date. That's ridiculous. This initiative process was added to the Mississippi Constitution in the 1990s as Section 273. It requires petitioners trying to get an initiative on the ballot to gather 1/5 of signatures from each congressional district. Mississippi had 5 congressional districts at the time that was written, but the state dropped to 4 districts after 2000 census, and the language dealing with the initiative process was never updated. Just a royal screw-up by government in Mississippi. That is pathetic. Now on to some good news out of the States. The Office of Medical Cannabis Use highlighting more growth this week in Florida, as we see patients last week was around 551,000. Now that's up to 556,000. So another 5,000 patients have signed up. We've got the doctors back up to the 2,552 level, which is good. Another 100 were added there. But the main thing, if we can see 5,000 patients added a week, and Kim Rivers even in the recent interviews mentioned that they were at about 6,000 patients before now. That is a very healthy pace where about a year, like every year, you're growing by 250,000 patients or 260,000 patients. So you gotta love to see that. That growth is going to lead to growth in sales. And obviously, as we can see, sales are still very strong Florida-wide. On top of that, Green Thumb and Cookies announces the grand opening of Cookies on the Strip in Las Vegas on May 14th. The company previously announced an exclusive partnership with Cookies, an international cannabis brand, making this their first cookie store in Nevada. The retail location will sell the acclaimed portfolio of Cookies, Lemonade, Runts, Mints, Powers Up Genetics, Collins Ave, Run the Jewels, and Grandiflora products in the brand signature blue retail environment. Based in the Bay Area, Cookies was founded by prolific rapper and entrepreneur Berner, along with his partner Jay, a highly respected cannabis cultivator and breeder. With the opening of Cookies' first location in Nevada on the iconic Strip, this adds to the growing international footprint of Cookies' location. Berner will be on site for the grand opening, along with Rick Ross, the official Cookies bus, and other appearances by special guests. And according to Ben, we are thrilled to open the first cookie store in Nevada in partnership with Berner J and their visionary team. Brand recognition is key to winning in the cannabis industry, and with Cookies, Berners has created one of the most desired and recognizable cannabis and lifestyle brands. We are excited to partner with them to open this flagship location right on the Las Vegas Strip. People are looking for experiences as the country reopens, and Cookies offers a unique one for residents and tourists alike. And with this, I just want to emphasize what Green Thumb is doing, what a lot of other companies in this industry are doing. They're focusing on brand, because when you think of, let's say the shoe industry, you don't think of individual shoes, you just think of the top brands, Nike, Air Jordan. When you think of cell phones, Samsung, Apple. So by focusing on building brand, supplying the demand with great branded products, and then that way retaining loyal customers over time, it's a very good approach that has worked in tech industries, other industries, and we're seeing it in real time, very young, and it's just the beginning in the cannabis industry. But you gotta love to see that. And on top of that, Columbia Care unveils national retail experience with launch of Cannabis, another brand style, creating a national dispensary network leveraging proprietary technology platforms to support the customer journey anytime, anywhere. So they announced today the launch of the new retail brand Cannabis. More than a dispensary, Cannabis will serve as the intersection for medical and recreational cannabis users to provide a higher experience built on one of the largest customer data repositories, passion, technology innovation, community commitment, and product standards. The first location to launch under the Cannabis brand is the recently opened dispensary in Springville, Utah, which had its first sale Friday, April 30th. By the end of May, 3 existing Columbia Care locations in Tempe, Arizona, Ville Park, Illinois, and San Diego, California will become Cannabis branded retail locations, with a pipeline of more than 80 new and existing locations to follow over the next 24 months. So that's quite an interesting approach. Cannabis is not only a reflection of where we are now and all of the markets we serve, but it is also a commitment to where we are going. We believe Cannabis will become a hub for all those who incorporate cannabis into their lives, regardless of what brought them to us. The Cannabis brand can grow with an ever-changing industry, continuing to meet the needs of our patients and customers and serve as the platform for continuous innovation, says Jesse Channon, Chief Growth Officer at Columbia Care. So, and then lastly to highlight, by investing in this transition now, we will provide a new experience for our existing community and look forward to welcoming new customers who will come to see the cannabis, or who come to see cannabis in a whole new light. So whether it's branded products that people love or a shopping experience that people love, building brand early and, building loyal customer support over time is fundamental in any business and sustainable for long-term growth and success. While VRNO upsizes existing credit agreement by $100 million with a 9.75 annual interest rate on a non-dilutive basis. So just wanted to highlight this, as VRNO has secured a term loan of $130 million US dollars, and again with an annual interest rate of 9.75% for the incremental amount. This is the second MSO only to get an interest rate under 10% on any sort of funding. So this is just another milestone, showing that this is going to be more common. Access to capital is getting easier, while Chicago Atlantic Advisors, obviously a company out of Illinois, that will act as the administrative agent and collateral agent, closing on the foregoing transaction, subject to customary conditions, contingencies, and approvals. And again, highlighting that this is a small, well, I don't know if it's a small, but it's a boutique Illinois investing firm, not a national U.S. bank like Wells Fargo or any of these that, once SAFE passes, will definitely be able to help these cannabis companies with even better interest rates. On top of that, ETFMG extends cannabis suite of ETFs with the US Alternative Harvest ETF, MJUS. So, with the growing popularity, they've added a new cannabis ETF, which offers investors exposure to US cannabis companies, including MSOs. MJUS offers investors exposure to cannabis companies operating in the United States, including multi-state operators directly involved in the cultivation, production, marketing, and distribution of cannabis and cannabis-related products. MJUS is ETFMG's second cannabis investment offering, joining the highly successful ETFMG Alternative Harvest ETF, MJ. MJ, which debuted in December 2017, which focuses mostly in Canadian companies, has become a proxy for U.S. investors looking to invest in global cannabis with nearly $1.7 billion in assets under management. And so the way they view it, there is no better time, as currently the U.S. cannabis single and multi-state operators are only available to U.S. investors through second-tier foreign exchanges, which are not widely accessible through U.S. brokerages. MJUS's uniquely investment strategy rivals that of its competitors by offering investors a way to benefit from the continued growth of the U.S. cannabis industry and the leading companies directly involved in the cannabis-related activities in the United States. So we are especially proud to be bringing yet another cannabis product to investors, specifically an ETF that captures one of the greatest untapped areas of growth potential in the industry, says Sam Masuka, founder and CEO of ETFMG. So hey, the more ETFs, the merrier. And on top of that, great news as cannabis medical research growers receive U.S. approval from the DEA. Finally, DEA licenses companies to cultivate cannabis for study, following orders that came when Obama was leaving office. The U.S. government has approved new growers of research cannabis for the first time in more than 50 years. People involved in the process said, widening the capacity to study the drug's medical value. The DEA's action after years of delay means researchers will be able to study cannabis from more than one grower. A farm at the University of Mississippi, which the government approved in 1968 as the only legal source of pot for cannabis research, for federal research as well. Researchers have long argued that they need to study a wider variety of the plant to know if it can be effective in alleviating pain, fighting seizures, combating depression, and relieving post-traumatic stress. So main thing to highlight is that this was something that they could have started doing in 2016, but they waited as long as they possibly could. And it seems as if, though, now someone's telling them to take action, which ultimately, big picture, makes me more optimistic, again, just about cannabis and the sentiment changing. On top of that, though, a bit of a world tour, Spanish government to examine benefits of legalizing medical cannabis, another state or another country out of Europe. Today, the Commission de Sanidad y Consumo, Spanish Congressional Health and Consumers Affairs Commission, voted to establish a subcommittee with the express purpose of exploring the potential of medical cannabis legislation by examining policies in other countries and producing a report for the consideration of government. They might as well just hire me to do all that. The proposal was filed subsequent to a statement by the Spanish government that the decision to create programs for the use of cannabis for therapeutic purposes in Spain will be taken where appropriate, weighing the evidence that exists in its effectiveness and therapeutic treatment and the adverse effects of the use of cannabis. The new subcommittee has the following formal purposes: to analyze the experiences of other governments that have regulated medical cannabis access schemes. This will be completed with the input of foreign government personnel and other experts in the field to produce a report with proposals for the best practices in the control of medical cannabis in Spain. The report will be completed and presented by the subcommittee within 6 months of the initiation of the project. The report will be appraised by the Health and Consumer Affairs Commission before being sent for further consideration to the Spanish Congress. So it doesn't mean that's coming anytime soon, but obviously any positive sentiment is better than any negative sentiment. And on top of that, we hear coming out of Malawi, as tobacco declines, Malawi must switch to cannabis, according to their president. So let's learn a little bit about that.
Malawi President Lazarus Chakwera has warned that the country's lead foreign exchange earner, tobacco, is in terminal decline, and urged a switch to cannabis and other high-growth crops instead. In a State of the Nation address on Wednesday, Chakwera said tobacco was expected to earn less than $200 million in 2021. That figure is roughly similar to the past 2 years, but well below previous annual earnings of up to $350 million. Clearly, we need to diversify and grow other crops like cannabis, he said, pointing out that the drug was legalized last year for industrial and medicinal use.
Economic reasons.
Chakwera said that aside from tobacco, the agricultural sector was booming and would enable economic growth to recover 3.8% this year based on the latest forecasts. But decades of public health education have gradually convinced people worldwide of the dangers of tobacco. Malawi's parliament passed a bill in February 2020 making it legal to cultivate and process cannabis for medicines and hemp fibre used in industry.
Fibre.
It stopped short of decriminalising recreational use. Countries around the world are relaxing laws on cannabis. That includes several in southern Africa, such as Zambia, Lesotho and Zimbabwe.
Highlighting that freeing this plant was never just about getting stoned or being lazy, but this video in itself just highlighted the economic reasons, social reasons, medicinal reasons, all of the beneficial reasons why we are seeing the sentiment towards cannabis change. And lastly, portfolio update, I just wanted to share with you all, because on Friday I did make a move, the first one in a while. Now on Thursday I mentioned that I was sleeping without realizing how low Cresco's share price has fallen to, and for myself, I'd set a threshold, $14. Anything below $14, I'm willing to sell some profits in order to increase my holding in Cresco, which is my largest position, but by doing so, I'll bring my average price down, and ultimately I'll just have more money invested for when the trend eventually changes in the other direction. So Friday morning, I was pretty adamant on getting this done, so I set a sell order at $5.15 a share for harvest, getting out roughly $4,200 or just under $4,200. In order to buy more Cresco. Now, throughout the day, it was up above $14 a share, and so I thought, I went for a walk, and I figured at 3 p.m. I'll come back to it and see if it falls below there. And, I was lucky, but I stuck to my guns, and it did. I saw a price of $13.90 a share, and this is where in the past I've screwed myself. I thought, well, what if it falls lower to $13.70? What if it falls lower to $13.60? Maybe I should keep setting it and just waiting. But for myself, I was like, look, 14 is your threshold. Buy at $13.90. This is a hell of a deal. What if it doesn't fall lower and you miss out? Sure enough, I'm glad I did, because as you can see, Friday after I purchased at $3.45, the close price shot up to $14.33. And it was just one of those where you cannot time this. It's just so important not to second guess yourself and cheap out and take action. If one of the check boxes that you've previously promised yourself, if we fall into that category, you're doing it, you're taking action. So as an investor, I felt very good about that move. And so that, again, gives me about $34,000 invested now in Cresco, which is my largest holding by far. Obviously, I'm down a little bit, but check the worry in my eye. In the long run, I know that Cresco is going to be worth a lot more than it is now. But as you can see, my updated portfolio, the only positions I've really sold since then are Harvest. As you can see, Tetra Biopharma, where I was heavy in the red, it seems as if the idea of prescription drugs and inflammation drugs revolving or focus less on opioids and more on THC is becoming popular, and for that reason I think TBP is getting more attention. So in time, I know that I've got 14,000 shares. I plan to possibly sell 4,000 more if it will allow me to get into Cresco at under $14 a share. Will that opportunity come again? I don't necessarily know, but just wanted to highlight how one thing I will never do, or at least try not to do, is sell any loss positions in order to recoup an average down, because obviously the rule in investing is rule number 1 by Warren Buffett, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget about rule number 1. So obviously if you can take profits out of a good investment and move that into one that's down to average down, that is a strategy that I've done over time. It did work with Afria, but obviously you have to have picked the right company. It is risky if you don't necessarily understand what you're investing in, so that is why it's so important, again, to focus on what your plan is and not what anyone else is doing. And then as you can see, the only other difference in here is that my Afria shares have become Tilray shares, and they've gone from an average price of $5.64 to $6.73. But again, with this whole shift turning, we've got 2 weeks for Schumer to possibly drop his bill. And the way I view it is if he doesn't drop that bill, it gives me more time to buy more shares of Cresco. And if he does, I likely won't be able to buy any more shares in the meantime, but I'll be able to sell some in the future and then regroup for what I might want to do in 2022. So just wanted to share that update with you all, folks. And as we end this off, we do head back for more cannabis earnings coming next week. Columbia Care will start it off tomorrow on Monday. After that, we'll have VRNO holdings on Tuesday, May 18th. Those will come out. And then we've got some of the bigger MSOs, TerraScend, Tilt Holdings, Air Wellness on May 26th, and then Cresco Labs, the one I'm anticipating the most, on May 27th. So I'm getting excited. How do you feel, folks? Do you think we're going to hear something from Schumer soon in the coming weeks? Let me know in the comments what you think. But I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something. If you did, please leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any new videos, and I will be back with some earnings and a midweek update next Wednesday. Have a great day, everybody.